The story starts with a nameless narrator standing above a railway cutting. He greets a signalman that's standing on the railway with "Hello below there." The signalman, who operates the pointed signals from a signal box in order to control the movement of trains, doesn't look up to the narrator as greeting, instead turns around to look down the rail line. The narrator asks if he's able to come down to him, and the signalman reluctantly points to a path he can follow without saying anything. The narrator descends to the cold, damp, and gloomy railway and approaches the signalman, who at first seems nervous. After the narrator assures him that they've never met before, the signalman relaxes and brings him into his box. Now in his hut, the signalman and narrator talk about the signalman's work. After a short while, the narrator detects something is troubling him and inquires to the nature of his problem. The signalman does not give an answer and says he might tell the narrator about it should he visit a different day. They agree that they will meet again tomorrow. The signalman instructs the narrator not to call out like he did at the beginning of the story when he returns, and asks what made him cry "Hello below there," and if there was any supernatural influence on it. The narrator says there wasn't, then departs. The narrator returns the next night without calling down to the signalman as per his instructions, and they return to the hut. Here the signalman tells the narrator that what troubled him earlier was how he reminded him of someone he had seen before and begins telling the story. The story goes that one night he heard someone crying "Hello below there" from the rail line. He ran outside to investigate and saw a figure waving one hand and holding the other in front of their face. The voice continued to warn him as he got closer, but when he got to it, the figure disappeared. Within 6 hours of this, a train crashed, causing many deaths. Half a year later, the figure appeared again with both hands over their face, but this time was standing silent. Shocked, he went back inside to calm down, but when he went back outside, the ghost had disappeared once more. That same day, a young lady died on a train and was brought into the hut where they were sitting. This concludes his story, but the signalman continues, saying that the ghost was present at the tunnel outside when the narrator had visited the last time. He believes these signs are warning of a third tragic incident to come. The narrator comes back the next day to find a group of officials surrounding the railway. When he asks why they're there, one of them responds that the signalman had been killed by an oncoming train. According to the driver of the train, the signalman had been standing on the rails intently looking at something, and despite his warning of "Below there, look out, for God's sake, clear the way," continued to stand there as the train struck him. The driver held one hand in front of his face and waved the other as he cried out this warning, exactly as the ghost did during its first appearance in the signalman's story. This story is not in a Gothic setting. Written in the 1950s, there are trains, telegrams, and light fixtures throughout the novel. However, Charles Dickens uses Gothic theming, such as the impersonal narrative and supernatural occurrences, to put across his message of human powerlessness. This would be like if someone today wrote a story about the Jetsons, but it's a spooky ghost horror story. This juxtaposition between two themes combines two different forms of anxiety, one of unimaginable horrors that lurk in the dark and another of the real horrors of today's industrialized society. Throughout the story, nothing is told to us directly. Everything is either left up to interpretation or never mentioned at all. This is exemplified through the narrator. The story is introduced not by identifying the narrator or the setting, but with the cry "Helloa." We are never told the narrator's name, his occupation, his reason for being in the story, or his motivations to keep the story moving forward. Everything is left up for the reader to determine. This aligns with similar Gothic writing of the time, such as Wide Sargasso Sea, a story in which the titular character Antoinette at some points has no relation to her cousin Sandy, and at other points will randomly reference their love affair in an offhand comment. This Gothic theme of indirect form of storytelling creates a disassociation with contents of the novel, as it forces the reader to question whether events truly mean what they are supposed to, and often imply trains of thought. In White Sargasso Sea, the unreliable narrator creates a wiggle room for multiple interpretations of the story and the justification for characters' actions. However, in The Signalman, this is used to create a feeling of complete disassociation from the events in the story, leaving every character with zero sense of control. Another element present throughout The Signalman is the presence of the madness and the supernatural. The Signalman, who is perceived as a madman for a portion of the story, and the ghost in the tunnel, are both reflective of 19th century Gothic literature, when stories were in their edgy spiritualism phase. Many similar Gothic stories share these elements, such as Jane Eyre, in which the character Antoinette, renamed Bertha, is simultaneously described as quite ghostly presence at some times, and a ravaging wild beast in others. These stories are also similar in the way they use these characters to question the nature of their madness. In Jane Eyre, Antoinette is used to question whether Rochester is really a good man, or if he is the cause of her madness. In The Signalman, the ghost's seeming control over the occurrence of death seems to imply that the supernatural is responsible for the deaths. However, further analysis shows that the ghost, with a hand over its eyes, seems to only be attempting to warn the narrator of the events before they occur. This leaves the underlying question of whether it's the ghost's responsibility for the murder of the Signalman, or if it really do be that way though sometimes in the society we live in.